Hi, how you doing? I'm Craig Goldie, and I've got a lot of things to show you that I've learned throughout the years that will change the way you approach your guitar playing. Some of you may not know anything at all. Some of you may have quite an assortment of little tricks up your own sleeves. And that's what this video is all about, to take your nothing or your something and turn it into true guitar wizardry. Not just fast or flash, but how to play like a well-rounded guitar player and still have what it takes to compete in rock and metal music in the 80s. In this edition of the Backstage Pass, Learn While You Burn rock instructional videos. It's one thing to know that you play through your Marshall, but another thing is how to use it, because a lot of people, you know, they crank up their preamp, and all that does is distort and fuzz things out too much. So you want to back it off to about 6.5. Master volume depends on how loud you want to be. Treble, you don't want to be way too over the deep end with that, because it's just going to make it scratchy, and the people that listen to you aren't going to want to listen to you. You know what I mean. So middle, you want to be around 3. Because too much middle, all it does is just get a little honky. So, and you don't want that. So, bass, I go about 6, because you want a good hefty sound, because you want it to be too muddy, or you don't want it to be not enough bottom. So, I found that 6 on a Marshall is just great. Presence, same thing, 6. Because that does is just bring it a little closer to your face. Okay, so I also use a Furman equalization. It's a parametric equalizer. The reason why I use it is because the Marshall 2203 has a great sound, but it needs a little kick in the butt. So that's why I use this parametric equalizer. And these are just basically high, mid, and low, same as on the amp. And I just kind of, you can tune it into however you hear it. Also, I use the Eventide harmonizer, and I use this for a low octave. And that's just something that I've acquired because I like to have a real low, beefy, growly, grinding sound sometimes to my solos. Almost like if something like a dragon in hibernation got woken up and it's real pissed off. That's what this sounds like to me. So that's why I use it. And I use this Roland delay because this also has delay, but it can't do both functions at once, so I need another outboard delay. And I like the Rolands because they're clean sounding, and they have lots of different things you can flange and chorus. But I mostly only use this for delay, and that's for soloing mostly. I use it sometimes in riffs because it can be interesting, but I mostly use it for solos. And I'll get into that later on how to show you how to tweak it in just right, because if you just one little knob here, the delay out can be the difference between way too much or way too little, just the smallest little turn. So that's what this is. I also use the bottom one for chorusing, and I don't like to use it on a distorted guitar because all that does is it's like a campaign manager for high end. It just sounds too trebly. So only on a clean sound do I use the chorusing. This I just use just to preamp it, just to drive it a little bit. Down here, it's a tube driver. All that is it's a tube. It's a preamp tube. So, and it's got its own little, the amount of tube drive you want, the level, high end and low end, and you got to just dial those in depending on what you want, you know. And these are all the on and off switch and preset shifts. These right here are just echo on and off, octave on and off, and whether or not I want to shift back and forth on my delay. If I want to go back to a chorus and then back to an echo, I just press on these things. That's it. I don't like to use a lot of effects. I like to, this may seem like a lot of effects, but I'll tell you, there's some other guys that have walls of effects, and all that does really, like I said before, they go on campaign and they start promoting high end, because if you got it in your rig, it just adds too much high end. You can back it off a little bit, but all in all, it's better to have the sound man do it, I found. So I only use it with clean things and solos mostly. Okay, before we get into the serious stuff, we got to tune up. And I hate to do this to you, but I'm tuned to A440, and you could be tuned to A440, but your VHS machine could play faster or slower than this tape was recorded at, so we might be out of tune. So let's tune up. E, open E. If you didn't get that, rewind. A. D. G. B. E. It's in an E chord together. Okay, if we're the slightest bit out of tune, just rewind and get it back together. And you'll notice sometimes, even though your strings are tuned to the tuner, you'll still have to fine-tune it to the distortion, because sometimes the harmonic curves and things that happen in your distortion will make it appear to be out of tune. So you're going to have to tune the distortion too. So keep that in mind. So if we're in tune, then we're cool. We'll go on to learning while you're burning. Okay, there's a diagram that shows all the strings, all the notes for each string for each fret. The diagram reads as if the guitar was facing straight at you. And you got your open string E, A, D, G, B, and E, obviously. And then it comes down this way also. So the first string, first fret is F, F sharp, G, so forth, up to the 12th fret. Because that's where actually, if you were to take the 12th fret up, is actually starting over again. That would be equal to the open string. So it starts all over again. It's exactly the same, so that's why I didn't give you from the 12th fret up. And the reason why I put that in there is so that way you know all the notes for every fret and every string. So when you learn these scales that are also in there, like A minor, E minor, things like that, you can learn the notes in those scales, because there are only going to be 8 notes in there. And then you can find the rest of those notes all the way on your guitar, so that way you're not limited whatsoever to just one pattern or one section of your neck, that you can play these scales all the way over. And I've written in the pamphlet how to do that, how to make the scales and how to further them back and further them forward, so that way you're not limited whatsoever. Okay. Also, in the pamphlet there's things like, I want to go over a couple of terminology things. You know, there's going to be symbols for a whole note bend, that kind of thing, where you bend from one note a whole step to another note. It'd be as if you're going on your 7th fret on your G string, which is a D, and you're going to pull it up to an E, which would be equal to the 9th fret. There's also things for vibrato, pull-offs, hammer-ons, all that sort of thing, and it's explained in there, so we're cool. Okay, now I want to show you some exercises for playing fast, because I want to catch you guys up to basically what an intermediate guitar player would be at. So I'm going to take it for granted that you guys know your scales, and that you know how to play from the end of the neck to the top of the neck pretty fluidly in that scale. So we're going to use an A minor scale, and we're going to start at the 12th fret. basically there's some good things to do just for like double picking, okay? The scale we're going to use is this, starting at the 12th fret. Okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to double pick those. Now, I double pick a different way. I don't use my wrist. If you want to use your wrist, that's okay. I just use my fingers. But what you want to do is go... stuff like that. And then what's good is you want you to practice going up and back the strings as fast as you can do it without goofing up. Okay? And now there's some tricks to that, okay? What you want to do is you want to start with just the first string, obviously, and go to the first 3 notes before you have to change strings. And then jump as fast as you can or accent the note to the next string. I'll do that again. And same thing when you come back down. Okay? And there's some things, as when I mentioned accents, and that can make something that's not quite fast for your left hand, but fast for your right hand sound really fast. And I'm going to, for instance, I'm going to play just this. But I'm going to do accents and double picking. What I'm doing no more than this. But I'm accenting on the second string. I'll show you. That makes it sound faster. If you didn't have the accents, it'd sound like this. Another thing for playing fast is what I just call like spider hopping. You go up and back, and then down and back. And that makes it sound really fast. And using your accents as well. Accent into the string that you're going up to, and then accent to the string that you're going back to. I'll show you what I mean. What I'm doing is I'm starting on the A string, I'm going up to the D string, then coming back down to the A string, and then going from the A to the D, back to the G. I mean, up to the G. Then when I get to the G, I go back down to the D, and then go D, G, B, and then come back down on the G, come back down on the B and the G, the D strings, and so forth. I go up 1 string, down 1 string, up 3 strings, down 1 string, up 3 strings, down another string, and then up 3 strings. And that gives the illusion of it being really fast. And when you add the proper accents, it sounds extremely fast. Well, I hope it does anyways. Get what I mean? There's another exercise for playing fast, and in the spider hopping thing, is what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up my A string to my D string, back to my A string, then from there go up to the D and the G, then go back from the G to the D, go from the D to the G to the B, from the B go back to the G, and then go from the G to the B to the E. There you go. Okay, there's a long-lost, forgotten art in heavy metal music or rock music, and that's the rhythm guitar playing. A lot of people just think all it is chunky bar chords and they're cool. But that's cool. A lot of times that's cool, and that's the best thing for the song. But my point is that a lot of people do nothing but that. So what I'm going to show you is a way to get around that, make your rhythms a lot more interesting, using the chunky bar chords and what I call another type of spider hopping, which is going back and forth from each string. A couple of things that sound like riffs that I call riff light or mini riffs, and then different voicings. I'll explain those after it's done, and just a way to go in and out of a basic chord change to make it sound interesting, rather than just playing a bunch of bar chords. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off like this. That's the tempo, and that's 3/4. And with my friend Jimmy Waldo here, I'm going to show you one of the verses in the album Dream Evil. Okay, now that's kind of a beefy, cool sounding verse there, and the reason why it sounds the way it does is this. The basic foundation of that is just the C, B flat, back to C, and then G sharp, then the G. Then it goes C, B flat, G sharp, G. Now, there's voicings inside of there that, let me just take it from the beginning. The very beginning is what I call spider hopping, which is this technique right here. You're muting the strings, and I'm only using the first 3 strings of the C chord, and that's on the A and the D and the G string. It goes like this. Just like that. And then I do what I call somewhat of a riff light or mini riff right after that to bring me to the B flat with the spider hopping, with another kind of a riff inside of that to bring it back to the C. Now that's a different kind of a voicing. That is, you got the G sharp here, and then when I'm playing a B flat major over a G sharp bass. Now the G sharp bass here, and then a B flat major. And what that does is that it gives it a wide spread, and doesn't make it so block. Put something in the middle of it, it makes it interesting. And also the major third of the B flat major here, the major third is acting as like a flatted fifth to the to the G sharp. Here's your G sharp, here's your fifth. This would be the flatted fifth. And that gives it kind of an eerie, that's inside of the B flat chord. That's what gives it that kind of an eerie sound. So that's one type of rhythm playing that I think is very important, is using those kind of voicings, spreading chords when you're going from one point to another, and it's only 2 chords. You want to spread some things in between it, make it kind of a splash of sound, and also doing those riff lights, these type of things, and this type of thing. What that's doing is I'm just filling in between the G sharp and my next step is the G. So instead of just going, what I'm doing is I'm building it up to it. I'm going up. But I'm not staying out of the realm of that G sharp. I use the B flat major to give it a spread, and it's kind of a climb, so it goes. Now that first thing is just the major voicings of the G sharp after the B flat. So I go. Those are the next higher voicing of the G sharp major chord. So you got this and this and this. But that sounds a little too corny to go. So I don't do that. So, and that just gets me back to the G, where I want to go in the first place. Whoops, sorry. And I want to end on the C, which gives us back to the chorus. So that's just some things to keep in mind. I'm not saying that that's going to be the best thing for you, but it works the best for me. And especially when you're working with block chords like that. And I don't mean to put any kind of a negativity on block chords, but that's just the best kind of thing to make them more interesting than that. Okay, I got one more thing to show you in the rhythm playing that's really important, and it has a lot to do with voicings that I mentioned before. If you're not really familiar with voicings, what that is since a chord is merely made up of notes that are in the scale that you're using, is you're utilizing all the notes in the scale to broaden the chord to make it more interesting. For instance, I'm going to show you a verse in a song called Sunset Superman off this latest album. And it's in A flat. And in A flat, you've all the notes in an A flat or A flat minor scale to use for your benefit, or maybe not your benefit. A flat chord. Anything. Those are voicings, things that just make it more interesting. You're broadening that chord out more, but just by adding notes or adding more things. So I'm going to show you another effective way of using voicings. Then you're just kind of, when we're going into the next part. But I'm mixing chunky bar chords, which is good to use, and voicings to make things more interesting, and a small riff light sort of thing. This thing in between those chords. Which is just kind of a small melody to bridge the one chord into the next chord, or the next half of that chord. That's basically all it is. And that's over the bass note of an E. And all I'm doing is, instead of going over that, I'm letting somebody else do the, or overdub it and do this. Using the melody of this. Over the E. And that's it for rhythms, really, that I want to show you. The long-lost, forgotten art. The next place I want to take you to is in the realm of riffs. And that can be complicated, or it cannot be, just depends on what you really make out of it. I like to keep away from real complicated riffs, because sometimes too much can be just as bad as not enough. And you don't want to be real stock. You don't want to come up with stock riffs. For instance, now that's a stock riff, you know, and some people use it as their main riff of a song. To me, a riff should be more interesting, but not so far off in left field that it's not understandable. That's why I want to show you this riff that I wrote for this song called Dream Evil. And inside this riff is what I call pivot notes. It's almost like a basketball player. When he stops dribbling, he's got to pivot off of his feet. And this is the same type of thing. I'll show you the riff, and then I'll show you what I mean by pivot notes. Okay, what I did there is I've got a basic melody to work with, which is this. Now, if I was to just play that, that's exactly what it would sound like. Which is not right. That's why I use pivot notes. Pivot notes, to me, like I said before, are notes in between those kind of things that bring them together, like this. Fast, it sounds like this. And in those chords that I'm playing, all I'm doing that is to break it up, because you don't want too many riffs going all together, because you need something to break it up in between there, almost like a turnaround. You get too many things jumbled up together, and it's just like, you know, falling down stairs at that point, you know. Sooner or later, you're going to hit ground. And to me, when you hit ground, those are the chords to break it up. So these are when I'm tumbling down the stairs now. Okay, the next plateau in riffs, as I'm going to show you, is using moving bass lines and voicings inside of a melody that the riff is. But before I get into that, I want to stress one point that a lot of people seem to forget all the time. And they mistake it as some sort of a beginning step, and then it gets left behind as a bad habit, and that is tempo. A lot of people just think they can just wail away and go through everything, and they forget that the groove is the most important thing out of everything. If you don't got a good groove and a good foundation that people can bounce their heads to or whatever they want to do, then you've got nothing. Because you can have the greatest riff and the greatest guitar riffs going on or whatever it is, but if it doesn't groove anybody, you're not communicating to anyone, you're not doing anything. So you want to, if it takes a metronome or if it takes a drum machine or whatever it takes, you got to get that down. You got to be able to communicate to somebody a feel. And if you can't do that, then you're lost. You might as well, it's like a non-believer trying to walk on water. He's going to drown. So no foundation, no nothing. So anyways, there's a riff here that I want to show you. Like I said before, that uses movements of the bass lines against the melody and some of the voicings. I'll play the riff on its own so you can hear what it sounds like without all the movement. Okay, that's the riff. And now I'm going to show you what it sounds like when we got a moving bass line and the voicings. What the voicings are is, here's the riff. Then it goes to D, and I'm using a 7th against the D, and then a G major against the D. Then when I go up to the D, the bass moves to an F, and which sounds really good together. And then when the melody moves down to, goes to the G. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, sounds good when those things move around with each other. And it sounds a lot better than it did when it was just played by itself. So, those of you who don't have keyboard players, it's a drag, isn't it? Get a rhythm guitar player, get a keyboard player or something, because they're really important to do that. So now, on to solos. Okay, I want to talk a little bit, or actually a lot, about solos and how to approach a solo. Because there's so many different ways to go about it. And today, there's so many guitar players, all they do is play fast. Fast, 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 fast. And when I was just goofing around, I'd do that a lot too. But when I go for a solo on an album or something like that, it's a whole different ball game. It's practically like a ball game. Going fast is like the home run. You go out there and hit a home run, you've got one run batted in. far as I'm concerned, when you want to approach a solo, is you want to come up with, you know, a good idea that sounds cool, like your bass hit. You got a bass hit, you do a couple of bass hits, you got the bases loaded. Then you hit your home run, you go fast, you batted in 4 runs. You got people going, whoa, that's cool. Same type of thing. With solos, what you want to do is you want to start somewhere, and somewhere that's either moody or pissed off or some sort of a theme or mood, and a lot of times the songs will dictate that. For instance, I sometimes use chords to start out my solos. For instance, in one solo, in F, I'll take the echo off. There's a chord thing that I do that sounds like this. And then I go on and play whatever. But the chord thing sets up the mood. It sets up an attitude. And then if you want to play fast or do some sort of a little melody thing or something like that, that's cool. But you want to always try and set up a mood. It could be using an effect like an octave thing. Right away, you've got some sort of a mood, an eerie type of thing going on. And then you can play fast and you can do anything you want. All right, when playing fast, a lot of people can interpret that as being unmelodic. Sometimes that's a misinterpretation, other times they're right, because a lot of times players will play fast and be unmelodic. And that's a real fine line, but what I want to do is I want to show you techniques of how to play fast and still be melodic, because that's really important. Sometimes it's good to be way off in left field and be abstract and be odd, because that'll take people by surprise. So that's cool, and I'll go over that later. But let me show you something here. This very simple thing that can be turned into something that sounds really fast but still melodic. Basically what I'm doing is this. Just starting in an E minor. Actually, it's really an E Dorian scale, and that's in the pamphlet, and you know what it is. Now, if you double pick and use the right accents on it, it'll sound really fast. What I'm doing is sometimes I'll hang on a note longer than it really seems to be proper in order to make it sound like that. I'll hang on the first note and then kind of friddle away on the other notes, and that'll give it the illusion that it's being really, really fast. And that's another technique. Okay, well, that's playing fast and being melodic at the same time, because there's still a melody in there as a basic, but you're still playing fast. And then once in a while, it's cool to be obscure. It's cool to be abstract, because you want to take people by surprise sometimes. Because if you hit too many bass hits, you got the outfielders that are coming in. You go, hit them way out in left field, you take them by surprise. So, for instance, if you're playing just something kind of basic, obviously, the abstract thing is just what I call the sweep. And it just comes out of the middle of nowhere. It doesn't last very long, but it takes people by surprise because they don't know what hit them. So the sweep is basically, I'm using an E minor scale and I'm sweeping across the notes like an arpeggio. An arpeggio is merely a chord being played note by note, like this. That's a chord. That's a D major chord. An E minor chord. And when you do it fast, it's a sweep. Sounds odd, but it can take people by surprise when you're playing just normal. But you only want to do a little bit, because you go too far and then, then you're an oddball, aren't you? Okay, so that's another aspect of playing fast, or solos actually. Is you want to be obscure, you want to be melodic, you can play fast and be melodic, and sometimes playing slow is being interpreted as being melodic, and that's not necessarily true. You got to come up with a cool melody. You just got to be up there somewhere. You know, you can't just sit around and play slow and think it's a melody. You know? That's goofy, it's stupid, but it's melody and it's playing slow. But there's cool things you can do that are slow and melodic. Okay, there's another thing that obviously you heard me do, is those of you who've got rhythm pickups, it's really good to switch back and forth from pickup to pickup during the solo. It gives it somewhere to go, a different, it's almost like a voice, if you know what I mean. You can make your guitar almost sound like it suddenly got pissed off, and I'll show you what I mean. That happens when you're playing on your rhythm pickup, which is kind of bassy, and then in the middle of a stretch, you flick your pickup to the treble position. It's kind of like a wah-wah pedal, and if you get it just right, it'll sound like it suddenly got pissed off. I'll show you what I mean. It just kind of opens up all of a sudden. It sounds almost like it's raising its voice. Okay, that's a technique that has been passed along through ages that I decided I wanted to learn, and that's just the two-handed style. And what that is it's all hammer-ons and pull-offs. And what I'm doing is I've got a melody on this string going. And then I've got bass line doing this. This is the first part. I'll play it slower to show you what I'm doing. And then I'm doing this behind it. So that part is and then the melody going. Now this part here is hammer-on and pull-offs as well. That's what it is slow. There's all sorts of other things you can do with that kind of technique, too. that is... then doing a moving bass line along with it with my other finger. That's the one I started out doing because it's a lot more basic. So, anyways, that will be written out in the booklet, so that way you can play it. And it'll have all the little symbols for what's a hammer-on, what's a pull-off, and all that kind of thing, so you'll be able to play it. And that's one technique of two-handed style. The other technique of two-handed style is much like playing piano. Same thing as all hammer-on and pull-offs, and I'll explain that in a second. Okay, I'm going to use this piece of tape for the meantime to just mute my strings, because I've got a muting device that I've developed that just hasn't been made yet, so I'm going to drag. So anyways, what this is just playing like this, like a piano. And to run over a couple of scales, it's always good to have a little echo on sometimes because it sounds a little like you're in a larger room. But anyways, you can play fast, you can play anything. You can, all it is hammering on and then pulling it off. Just like playing a piano, really. Anyways, that's not very good, but it's real fun, and it's a whole different style, a whole different technique of playing. It's just like playing a piano, and it's just something that you should try. You can use a little piece of tape, or when my muting thing comes out, you can buy it from me. Okay, another way of playing solos, or another way of approaching solos, is the one-handed style that I originated back about 5 or 6 years ago, just before I joined a band called Rough Cut. I was giving guitar lessons, and I had to write out tablature, and I was tapping the strings by myself like this and writing it out, and I wondered if I could play with one hand. Since it was all percussive, the open strings would vibrate and make a real bad sound. So my first reaction was to mute the strings with this hand. And I taught Vivian Campbell this, and he claims it's an old Jimi Hendrix riff, but it's not. So anyways, I'll show you what I mean. Basically, it's just all percussive stuff. Basically, it's almost the same as playing like this, because it's all hammer-ons and pull-offs. And when you play, you're used to this finger, especially your index finger, is always used to this picking, your right hand picking the note for it. So you got to really, that's something to overcome when you're climbing up the strings. The things that make a guitar player great, unfortunately, aren't written in anyone else's blood but their own. There are books to read and schools to go to that can teach you all the musical theory you'll ever want to know. And that's a great foundation to build on. And in this video, I've shown you all the things that have worked for me. But you've got to have a fire burning inside you so badly that even other people can feel the heat coming off like an incinerator. And that kind of desire you can't find anywhere else but inside your mind and somewhere deep in your soul. So if you work hard enough and you're willing to sacrifice it all, you'll get used to eating other people's dust. But somewhere along the line, could be years from now, your accomplishments will match your desire. And that's when dreams come true. And you guys are us guys just a couple of years ago. So thanks for tuning in here with Backstage Pass, and I'll see you on tour. like to introduce to you my fellow outcasts, or social outcasts as we are called. My good friend Randy Rand from Autograph, Jimmy Waldo from Alcatraz, and my good friend Frankie Bonelli from Quiet Riot. Thanks, guys. You guys are great.
No problem.
I wish I was. I wish I was. Hi, I'm Craig Goldie.